Howdy, folks, and welcome to Moose Podcast 255er. Hey, how you folks doing? Trust you had a great week. I did. Back from Monument Valley, which was just a marvelous trip with some great people. Appreciate all the love that some of my images I've posted over on Instagram has received. So thank you ever so much. Hey, I want to thank my good friends at Bedford Camera, bedfords.com. Did you folks know that when they have a sale, that if you mention the special discount MOOSE, you can get that sale price plus that special price because you mentioned that special code MOOSE. So you can save money on top of money. And then if you don't pay sales tax, and if your sale's over $99, and let's be real, in photography, what can you buy that's less than $99 anymore? That's really a lot of fun. You're going to save on shipping. So Bedford's Camera. And coming up in October is their PhotoCon, a very special one, kind of an outdoorsy kind of theme and locale. It's going to be a lot of fun. So make sure you check out that as well. Bedfords.com. Thank you guys for sponsoring the Moose Podcast. Well, I want to get right into this week's topic as usual. Not in my wheelhouse. Had a conversation, kind of a long conversation with a shooter. And well, they were really, I think, really down on their own selves and their photography, much more than their photography would indicate they should be. And after a few conversations, I was really beginning to wonder if I wasn't understanding something, I'd missed something, what was going on. And they had taken a few workshops from some other shooters. I'm not sure who, never would say. They've been reading, in my opinion, reading way too much. And because, as I mentioned, some of the stuff out there is just horse manure. And other stuff is so brief that the whole thought's not carried out. So it's really hard to incorporate that into your own photography. Anyway, we kept on going. And I started to hear this pattern throughout the conversations, not in my wheelhouse. I'd say something and the response was, not in my wheelhouse. And at first, I just thought it was a, kind of a quaint kind of a summation. And after hearing it for the 100th time, I asked him point blank, I said, you keep saying not in your wheelhouse. What's with that? And to me, they kept saying it in a way that I thought was putting themselves, and more importantly, putting down their photographic talents way too much. And they said, well, they showed their portfolio to a photographer they held in high esteem. I don't know who that was. And that person said, looking at the photographs, that they should stop trying to do this, that, and the other because it was not in their wheelhouse. And this photographer had latched onto it. And I was like, your critter pictures are pretty darn good, and you're putting in a lot of time, which is really important. And you're really perfecting you as a photographer. So why did you feel this was not in your wheelhouse? Oh boy, I shouldn't have asked that question. That was a long answer. And when they got done, I said, how about we turn this around? And they said, what do you mean? Well, how about you just kept saying to yourself, it is in your wheelhouse. That's in your wheelhouse. That's in your wheelhouse. And boy, there was silence. And they said, well, I hadn't thought of that. Now, what was in their wheelhouse? What is in your wheelhouse? What's in my wheelhouse? That's where, my mind started going, is to that, in a way of, you could say, stepping outside your comfort zone. If it's in your wheelhouse, you could say that's in your comfort zone. If you step outside the wheelhouse, then you're definitely going outside your comfort zone. And in some ways, that might not be a good thing to do. For example, if you're going out on a job and it's not your first time to do that job, but all of a sudden you have a client and you get this crazy idea that you should try something, just don't go with that one thing outside your wheelhouse. Stay inside your comfort zone and get the job and knock it out. And then time permits, the situation arises that you can step outside your comfort zone, outside of your wheelhouse, and perhaps try something new for your client. That might be a good idea. If you want to expand your photographic range and you want to grow as a photographer, you often, we all have to step outside our wheelhouse and do that thing called experiment, or, do an exercise, or trial by error, however you want to describe it. And in that process, of course, we are what? We're going outside our comfort zone, outside our wheelhouse. And in those scenarios, you might fail. That's part of the learning process. But if you have a successful photograph and it could have been better, that doesn't mean you were outside your wheelhouse. I'm here to tell you, and I explain this to them, there is still numerous times every day with a camera where I don't get everything quite right. That just happens. There's a lot of different reasons for it. Some of it could be because, point blank, what I'm trying is beyond my knowledge base. It's outside my wheelhouse, but I'm going to try it anyway. But when those photographs that are successful go out there and receive, from those viewers your photograph, kind words, you can't say, I was outside my wheelhouse. You cannot put yourself down because the photograph could have been better. Photographs are always going to be better. Always going to be better. And that's, why I keep shooting, at least, is because I know better is out there. So self-confidence, how important is it as a photographer? Really important question. One that's it's hard to answer. And being from experience, I can tell you for at least the first 10 years, I had zero self-confidence. And kind of got thrown in a deep end for some things and drowned a bit, and that left a mark. And there's no way that experience for any of us can't leave a mark, right? But doesn't mean that the self-confidence should always be what we are focusing on when it comes to that photograph. I talk a lot about on this podcast, the photographer. But that self-confidence comes from a couple of places. It comes, of course, from the photographer. It comes from the gear that you have and knowing that gear and what that gear can do for you. And that is something that you have to work towards. That confidence that comes from knowing that you grab that lens, and lens in this scenario on this body with this setting is going to work. That confidence, it resonates, and it brings you back within your wheelhouse in the fact that with that confidence, you then let go of perhaps your inhibitions. You let go of the concern of failure. And when that happens, at least for myself, then the creativity, the imagination, the craziness, the humor, the passion, all that is allowed to express itself. It's not being held back by that lack of confidence. And as I talked to this photographer, and I said, can we discuss this as, this photograph, really nice shot of just the tall grasses of Kansas. I love the tall grass prairie. Beautiful shot. You could, even though it was a still picture, my imagination, I could see it waving in the wind. It was gorgeous. And yeah, so it had a little lens flare, but I'm talking to him and I said, can you not say that in this photograph, you had the confidence to go and take this photograph and then to share it. And with that, you were within your wheelhouse. And they said, well, I never thought of it that way. And I said, so if we were to add up all the pros and all the cons, wouldn't you agree there's a whole lot more pros than cons? And they said, yeah. I said, so when we're talking batting averages for some National League baseball player, what's a really great batting average? And they said, oh, well, I hadn't thought of that way. I said, yeah, if they had a batting average of, 800, 900%, if we were to take your pros and cons, your photographs, and put it into such a number, wouldn't they be kind of like a superhero? And they said, yeah. And I said, well, then can't we say that about you and your photograph and photographs? So it also came back and reminded me how important the words that photographers, teachers, mentors, reviewers, how much weight people put on those photographs is really kind of sometimes much greater than the words that were said were meant to have. And that's, again, a thing of communication. And if you are on the other end of that, you have to realize there could be a lot of intent behind that, whatever was said, that might not be apparent. I don't think the photographer, when they said, you're outside your wheelhouse, I don't think they meant it to be a derogatory remark, but rather a backhanded kind of compliment in the way that perhaps this photographer kept pushing themselves, and in that they succeeded sometimes, not the others, of course, which is what happens. So I guess the other flip side of this coin is we need to actually think about what we put weight in when it comes to words being said. Somebody says something and all of a sudden you say, why do I even try? Well, perhaps that person said something because they think there's better in you. And at that moment, you didn't see it, and they were trying to perhaps push you forward. Not your wheelhouse. Yeah, we could flip it, and I did flip it by saying in your wheelhouse. But it comes back to the fact that we all have to understand that today we are going to be the best we possibly can. And if we work at it, we could be better tomorrow. We can find in that confidence and motivation to pick up that camera and perhaps try something that isn't in our wheelhouse with the knowledge we give it our best shot and see if we like it or don't like it. And that's really a big part of what comes in those photographs. I see it quite often with photographers when they are not thinking of f-stop and shutter speed, exposure mode, lens, but when they let that moment in, whether it's, whatever it is they're photographing, then all of a sudden the concept of being in your wheelhouse or not doesn't even enter the conversation. It's just the sheer pleasure and joy of putting that camera up and seeing all that glorious moment and go in your viewfinder and you go click and you just know you've got it. And that's really kind of important part of this photography. Much more, I think, than the rest of it. Yeah, we would all like it to be as perfect as possible. That's being human. But do we always have to beat ourselves up for it? Or let someone else's words sting to the point where we then start belittling ourselves? And that's the vicious cycle. So I want to encourage everyone, including myself, to always take a deep breath. Do, like I said to a friend of mine, 10-2. Just relax and realize that, yeah, the sun will come up tomorrow, and yeah, I'm going to look at those pictures and say, I wish I had done this, that, the other. Or I'm going to say, oh, I'm glad I got that shot. What a memory. And understand that's just the photographic process. And it's very important that we just realize that we have a lot in our wheelhouse that we can use as photographers, and that there's always going to be something outside our wheelhouse that we can either strive for or just ignore and realize it's not important as we move our photography forward. And that's really the bottom line. We just keep working on being better who we are as photographers, as visual communicators, and somehow it just manages to work out, and that's what's important. I trust you guys will have a great week. I hope I see a lot of you at Photoshop World. It's going to be a marvelous week. I'm really looking forward to it. My class is polished, ready to go. I've rehearsed them. All in the simple idea of just helping you with your photography be better visual storytellers. So remember to go out and to make every click your story.